Hello, this is Wes Bridle, and this is another Kingdom Calling Economic Update video. This is the second in a series of two, and this one I'm going to focus on news that's going on in the world that's going to affect you and signs that hyperinflation could be coming, or in other words, another word for that in my mind is a drastic drop in the value of the dollar, which might not be the way most people think of it, which is lots of inflation. It could be a more sudden, drastic drop in the value of the dollar, which would be terrible for you. And so I'm going to kind of talk about all these issues here. All of these points that I'm making up are really just small points that have happened in the last couple of weeks. If you have not seen the Coming Storm video, there's a link right near this video for you to go and watch that for free. I really recommend that you do that because it's the big picture. It's really important information about what's going to be happening, and we're really about to get started. So these videos, I just update you on things, and they might be a little bit concerning to you. Here we go. World governments are banning large cash transactions. It's a really interesting development. Mexico has a bill before their legislation to do this. Transactions over a certain size. Greece, same thing. Any transaction over 1,500 euros is going to be banned. I believe it's starting next year. Italy, the same thing. Over 5,000 euros is going to be banned. In the U.S., if you are a business and get over $10,000 in cash from a customer and don't report it to the IRS, you will go to jail. So the governments around the world, they issue this cash, and yet they don't want you using it. They want to be able to track everything. They want to support the banking system. And so it's a pretty interesting thing that they're more and more closing in on how you're allowed to spend money. You know, there's interesting, just very interesting connotations about that. The IMF last increased borrowing ability in the spring, and pretty soon after that, Europe started falling apart. It gives us a good indication. They're watching these things, and they knew Europe was about to fall apart, and so they increased their borrowing ability so that they had more money to bail out countries. Well, now here recently, the IMF has gone and increased dramatically again their borrowing capacity. They've gotten rid of limits. They've changed the duration, the term at which they can lend money to different countries, and they started a new kind where before they had rules about who they would lend money to. Well, now they've gotten rid of those rules. It should be a scary sign to you that they know something big is coming, that they're going to have to do a lot of bailing out. China, I'm sure I'm pronouncing this wrong, but I think it's a woman named Hu Jianlian. She's a vice governor of the Bank of China. Says the U.S. dollar is dangerous for China, and we've been talking about this for a long time, but they're openly talking about it right now, that they need to diversify away from the dollar. They have 65% of their currency holdings in the dollar, and they have been actively trying to diversify away. And I think I've got more about that down below. The Anglo-Irish Bank has just been split up. Ireland has some serious banking problems, as do many Western countries, and so they've just broken up their biggest bank so they can put all the problems in one bank and then have one healthy bank. But all their banks, they have several large banks that all have problems that are going to need serious bailing out, and the government absolutely can't afford to bail them out. So we're going to see more of those big problems. There's food shortages worldwide. There's been riots in Mozambique. If you've heard, you've probably heard, but wheat production around the world has been drastically cut short this year. And so Russia has stopped for this year and next year export of any wheat. And there's a lot of countries that depend on Russia for wheat. I think Canada's had problems. I think the U.S. is pretty much the only wheat producing country that hasn't had problems. So that's big issues. I'm not sure if I've mentioned that in a previous update, but there's riots over these things. This can end up being a dangerous thing, so it's something to keep an eye on. China and Russia have started trading in each other's currencies. So before, I've talked a lot about this. If you saw the Coming Storm video, we talked about this. Well, these things are happening now. I warned you in November, these things are happening now. China and Russia no longer have to trade their currency into dollars in order to buy and sell each other's goods. They're now doing it directly. China did the same thing with the Malaysian ringgit here recently. They're setting themselves more and more up as a world-dominating trading partner instead of being a small country that relies on a U.S. system. the more the countries of the world get off the US dollar as their world reserve currency, as the currency that they transact business in, the less they need the US dollar. It's something like 65% of all world currencies are held in US dollars. If they decide they don't need it anymore, that could be very, very dangerous to you and me who hold US dollars. Let's see, there's a report recently that there are enough vacant homes in China to support 200 million people. That's more than half of all Americans could live in the vacant homes that have built up recently in China in order just to keep their country going. China's done the same thing, actually in a more drastic way than the US did over the last couple of years. They've had tremendous amount of stimulus and they just keep people to work, so they just build houses. A lot of Chinese people have been doing very well, but they don't have all the stock market options and all the things to invest in, so they buy homes. But when you have 200 million vacant homes, that's a sign of a bubble. That can be a big problem for both them and for us if that were to crater. Credit default swaps in Europe have now surged to the crisis levels that we saw back in the spring. And Bangladesh just bought 10 more tons of IMF gold. The IMF also reported, this may have been reported earlier, but I just noticed it, 88 tons. They announced, I don't know, a year ago they were going to sell 400 tons of gold. They just have sold 88 more tons of it between March and July. So again, they want to suppress the price there, but it's not having any effect. Today, as I'm making this video, gold's rocketed up $25. It's at an all-time high nominally. European bank requirements yesterday or the day before were doubled, but only expect the banks to comply 8 years from now. So they really took a soft hand to banks. We're going to see more problems before these requirements really have any effect. And the U.S. is projected to issue 45% of the world's sovereign debt in 2010. That is a massive, massive number. That's how our government's operating right now. It's a scary thing. When we talk about these other countries not needing the U.S. dollar, well then why are they going to lend us money when we're producing 45% of the world's debt? We have nothing to back up that debt. And lastly, a strange story that I just saw this morning. The U.S. and British governments are conspiring with Iceland to make Icelanders pay for failed banks. There were some, if you remember, we talked about this months ago. Iceland put out they had banks that were doing some tremendously risky things. They were convincing, I think it was English and maybe Dutch or maybe German people to invest at a high interest rate with them. They were doing risky things. It all blew up. And then the governments of Europe and Iceland and apparently the United States wanted the people to agree to bail out these banks, the people of Iceland to bail out these Icelandic banks. Well, the people didn't take on this risk. It was the banks. In our country, we as people bailed out these banks. Somehow in that country, their system is set up, they got to vote on it. And so I think, if I remember correctly, the number was like 97% of people voted no, they're not going to bail out these banks. Because what that does is it puts the bank problems on the shoulders of you and me. And the Icelanders said no. We, the people of the United States, we just said, okay, Washington, that's what we have to do. It's going to hurt us. Icelanders said no, they're not putting up with it. Well, apparently there's a report that came out, a classified report that was released, that the U.S. and British governments were conspiring with Iceland in order to force the Icelandic people to pay for this without having to vote, even though they already voted that they weren't going to. Great to see our government's up to no good. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions about anything, always feel free to email me. And again, if you haven't seen the Coming Storm video, time is short. I really hope that you'll go and spend the time and watch that. It's free. The link is right here near this video. Thanks and God bless you.